Okay, so the Los Angeles/St. Louis Rams have two Super Bowls, which, isn't bad, right? One in 99 and one in 2021. But what if I asked you what happened in between those years? It can't be that bad, right? Well, nope, it can. And I don't even know where to begin, honestly, with a story like this. The Rams, during this stretch of time, in between their two Super Bowls, mainly sucked. And trust me, as you'll find out, I say they sucked, but honestly there aren't words available in the English dictionary that can possibly describe how unfathomably incompetent the Rams became in between their two crowning achievements. So, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's go over the rise, the fall, and the rise again of the Los Angeles Rams. And let's just have a good time with this one, because honestly, we may never see another franchise follow a trajectory like the Rams ever again. Once upon a time, many, many moons ago in the before times, the Los Angeles Rams were bad, but in the way that all great tales begin. The Rams were the nerdy kid. Nobody liked them. They had like Jerome Bettis, but the 49ers were still the NFL's bad boy at the time. They had Steve Young, and were cool. He's hot, right? So why would anyone care about the Rams? Then though, in 1995, the Rams moved to St. Louis for one thing and one thing only.
The money.
So, they were in St. Louis now, but nothing was really changing just yet. They were really not a good, well-functioning business, believe it or not. In 1997, though, they did try to get out of the canyon of despair they found themselves in and hired former Eagles head coach Dick Vermeil, which was an interesting hire. Dick was great, but he wasn't always perfect. Sometimes he wasn't in the mood, which happens, but Dick cited burnout as the main reason for why he stopped coaching the Eagles back in the day, despite making a Super Bowl in 1980. Regardless, though, the Rams trusted Dick could get the job done for the Rams and gave him a 5-year contract worth $7.5 million and full control of the team. 5 years. $7.5 million for 5 years for a coach. For reference, the last time a team brought back an old coach who was out of the job, basically, was when the Raiders brought in the nicey guy himself, when we gave the Gruden a 10-year, $100 million deal. So, I know this was in the before times, but I don't know, man. I feel like Dick got a little bit cucked here. But Vermeil immediately started changing the culture in St. Louis. If you've ever even seen a single clip of Vermeil, you'd know why he was a successful coach everywhere he went. He's just a genuinely amazing guy. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he was basically like a grandpa figure for every guy in the team. Locker rooms were more comforting and non-toxic, which, is a great thing. I don't know why that's so hard for teams to grasp, that all it takes is a good dude sometimes. But on the job, Vermeil was doing okay so far. Back in Philly, they had 15 straight losing seasons before he came into town and ended that, and although the Rams were still losing, they were clearly building something, and picking up a 6'7", 325-pound mound of flesh was, pound for pound, arguably the most important pickup the Rams have ever had. Orlando Pace was drafted first overall in 1997, and I don't know if this was intentional, but if the Rams didn't pick up Pace, their future success straight up probably wouldn't have happened. Pace would go on to make 7 Pro Bowls and easily made the Hall of Fame, anchoring this soon-to-be explosive Rams offense, but not in 1988, because this team was poopy butthole. They started an incredible 5 different running backs, while their leading rusher was some guy named June Henley, who never played in the NFL again after this year, and the only thing on his Wikipedia page is that he stole from a Walmart and has a lengthy criminal history. Right on, man. Alright, so they needed a complete retooling. They had wide receiver Isaac Bruce, who only played in 5 games in '98, and had some pieces on defense too, like a young London Fletcher at linebacker. So, alright, there's your exposition. You're happy? Because now that Dick Vermeil's seat was on fire, his hand was forced and he had to try to keep his job, doing everything in his power to do that, and his master plan, it really started coming together. Step 1 was get a fast guy at wide receiver and a fast guy at running back. And the Rams easily got both, way too easily. They drafted should-be Hall of Fame wide receiver Torrey Holt 6th overall, and then traded away just a 5th and a 2nd round pick. Both amounted to all nothing for the Colts, and in exchange, they received one of the best running backs in NFL history in Marshall Faulk. And if you're unfamiliar with his game, he was literally just like Christian McCaffrey before McCaffrey. He was the OG dual threat receiving plus rushing back, the definition of a do-everything Swiss Army knife, and the final offensive piece to add to this beautiful soup of life and flavor was an offensive coordinator and a quarterback. You know, every team kind of needs that. They're pretty important. And an opportunity that literally happens once in a generation revealed itself, when meanwhile in Washington, a potential franchise quarterback and his partner in crime were both looking for a new home. The Skins in '98 were led by Trent Green, who had a breakout season and rejected a 4-year deal from them. Wonder why? Anyway, he wasn't there yet, but Mike Martz, his quarterbacks coach, was also on the menu too, so Dick pounced. He scooped up Trent Green for 4 years and hired Mike Martz to be the offensive coordinator for the Rams. I mean, this was just a genius move from Vermeil. Even if this whole thing didn't work out, he assembled an absolutely absurd amount of talent in just a few months, and at the very least, it was going to be fascinating to see how this art project works out. But one thing's for certain, the Rams clearly had their quarterback of the future in Trent Green. But Washington wouldn't just let the Rams take away their offense and the future of their team like that. So when the Rams took away Green and Martz, they were still owned at the time by John Kent Cook after his dad passed away. But something inheritance tax, blah blah blah. He eventually sold the team to Schneider. But I don't know, man. Somehow, Washington was able to use some shaman to cast a spell on Trent Green before he left as a way to spite him from turning them down, I think. And for as long as the Rams remained in St. Louis, this ghost, the reaper of misfortune for Rams quarterbacks, came within the contract Green signed with the Rams, and he was here to stay. So let's give him a name. He's gonna be here for a while, so let's call him Bartholomew. But before we go any further, I gotta talk to you about this video sponsor, SeatGeek, who has been a recurring sponsor on the channel, as you probably know. And although the NFL playoffs are pretty much over, SeatGeek is still here to help scratch that sports itch if you got it, because they have a ton of different things to choose from. And what SeatGeek does, if you're somehow unaware, is help you buy tickets to any game or any other live event you may want to go to. It could be a concert or anything really, and as you probably know also, they rate your tickets on a scale of 1 to 10, so you'll know if you're getting a good deal. And what's super cool as well is that you can see the view from your seats from the app, so you know what you're going to get before you buy it, and you will never be caught off guard. So if that sounds good to you, use code TubFrog10 for 10% off your next order at SeatGeek. And even if you've used SeatGeek before, you could still use my code, once again, TubFrog10 for 10% off no matter what. So thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video, and without further ado, let's get back into it. So, alright, the Rams were ready to unleash a possible barrage on the NFL, but unfortunately for them, they were unaware of Bartholomew's presence, and he struck right away. In a preseason game versus the Chargers, as you probably know, Trent Green's knee got obliterated, and Bartholomew instructed Rodney Harrison to knock out Trent Green for the year with a knee injury, as the curse was then passed to his backup. But the backup quarterback just so happened to be world-famous grocery store employee Kurt Warner, who, once again, I'm sure you've heard of. There is no player in sports with a more Disney-type career than Kurt Warner. The man couldn't even hold down a practice squad spot, joined the AFL, and then finally made it to St. Louis. And in 1999, and as a 28-year-old rookie effectively, he was now tasked with quarterbacking what could be the most explosive offense in football. But hey, come on, nah, let's not forget how atrocious this team was in 1998. And as this dude said, in 99, even if Trent Green was healthy, there's no shot in hell the Rams were anything more than a mid-team at best. And with Green now in the tomb next to Bartholomew, it looked like the locker room and confidence in the team overall was not there. I mean, Dick Vermeil was bawling in his press conference after losing Trent Green, and I mean, rightfully so too. Alright, so Green gone, Warner in, but literally right away, in week 1, week numero uno, Kurt Warner, this old-ass rookie, basically, still, this was his second year in the league, but I'm calling him a rookie because that's what he was. He was the quarterback for what would become arguably the greatest single-season offense in NFL history and took the NFL ecosystem by storm. Warner again at the touchdown, Bruce! Kurt Warner could ball. That form of putting new cans of beans on the shelf had translated beautifully to the NFL, and in his first ever start, he had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And with a great offensive line, great weapons, and now a great quarterback, the 1999 Rams offense would go on to become arguably the best ever. I'm serious. I'm saying it twice because it means a lot. They got off to a scorching start too. They won their first 6 games of the season, including a win versus the 49ers, who had beaten the Rams 17 times straight. So this was, it meant more than just the actual win itself. And versus the 49ers, the torch was basically passed from Steve Young, and Kurt Warner took that small ball of fire and turned it into a colossal fireball. He played, statistically, maybe the best game a quarterback has ever played while still throwing for an interception, which is literally just what this offense was for the Rams in a nutshell in general. He went 20 for 23, 323 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a pick, still having a passer rating of 140. So it had come full circle, basically. The nerd had become the successful guy, or whatever the meme said from earlier. The Rams were hot all of a sudden, is what I'm trying to say, but not everyone was convinced. Many people thought this was just some Arena Football League mumbo-jumbo phase thing the Rams were in right now, and passing the ball this much and basically treating every down like it was 3rd and 20 wasn't going to work once defenses adjusted, but it was week 8. Nobody adjusted, so why are we still doubting them? I don't know, there's just something with new explosive offenses that scare old people. Recently this happened with the 2023 Dolphins, but if they were healthy all the way through and didn't play the Chiefs in the Ice Bowl, who knows what would have happened. But luckily for the 99 Rams, they didn't have to play in snow, and instead they played on turf, which was basically just concrete back in the day, which I'm sure felt like getting blindsided by an apocalypse hellfire, but it did make them faster, which only helped the Rams offense, as they just kept on going. They did lose to the Titans in week 8 for their first loss of the season, but they finished the year with 13 wins, and by season's end, nobody even understood what offense was anymore. So let's talk football for a second here. Kurt Warner, who in his first year as a starter was basically just Patrick Mahomes, with Mike Martz's scheme taking advantage of ridiculous wide receiver talent in Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce, as well as a disgustingly underrated offensive line. They utilized an Eric Coryell type scheme that kind of relied on developing passes down the field and long-ass throws, which, like I said, really relied on the offensive line, but it did lead to their quarterbacks also getting hit, and hit a lot, which honestly was one of the biggest issues with the scheme that we'll get back to. By year's end, Kurt Warner won the MVP, and he had a few records to his name too. Nothing crazy. He was only tied for the most 300-plus yard games in a season with 9, the most passing touchdowns in a season by anyone not named Dan Marino at the time, most passing yards in a season by any Ram ever, and he did all of this and so much more while leading the Rams to a 13-win season, like I said, but also a perfect home regular season record. They didn't lose at home once, and all the while, Warner took home the MVP. Marshall Faulk, the running back, by the way, he's still on the team, also became the first running back to ever go for 1,000 rushing and receiving yards in a season. He finished second in MVP voting as well, and also won the Offensive Player of the Year award. The top 2 finishers in the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year award were Faulk and Warner on the same team. That's how stupid this offense was. The Rams were just playing football from the future, giving the rest of the league a sneak peek into what the late 2010s would look like with an era that will be accelerated by one of their own eventually. Seriously though, these Rams were aliens. I mean, they never even scored under 21 points all year long. Not even the 07 Patriots can say that. And meanwhile, the worst team in football this year, the Browns, of course, only broke 21 points twice all year. Oh, and they also had a great defense too. The Rams had a top 5 defense and were led by Kevin Carter, who also had the most sacks in the league. How is this fair? But now, it was playoff time. It's time to put on that girdle and hope your sweet ass doesn't get exposed, cause sure, you had a cute little passing offense in the regular season, that was cool, but it's the playoffs. Things are just different, and in the divisional round, they played the Minnesota Vikings, who were 15-1 last year and were still led by a prime Randy Moss, so anything was possible, but instead, Mike Martz made one of the most overconfident predictions I've ever seen in my life. On a random Saturday night, Mike Martz just had one too many martinis and decided to drop his nuts on the phone, telling his buddy that he guarantees that the Rams are going to score a touchdown on the first play of the game. They had it all schemed out. The Vikings were giving them a freebie. Okay, bro. Yeah, sure. My brother in Christ, this is the NFL. Have some fucking respect.
Fires up the middle, a pass is caught to Isaac, and he's gone.
Damn. first play touchdown. Okay, well, I'm convinced. This Rams team was just built different. Isaac Bruce got a 77-yard touchdown in the very first play from scrimmage as predicted, despite popping his hamstring in warm-ups. And although the Vikings kept it close, the second half was a Rams reckoning. They had 5 touchdowns in the second half alone, as the Vikings didn't score a single point in the third quarter. Not ideal, with Kurt Warner having one of the best games a quarterback has ever had in a playoff debut, going 27 for 33, near 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and unfortunately a pick, which only brought his passer rating down to a garbage 143 again. And now it was time to take on the NFL's #1 defense by most metrics in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were the first team all year to make the Rams offense look vulnerable. The first pass of the game was a pick, and that was pretty much how the game went all day for the Rams. Their offense was getting absolutely shut out, but luckily for them, the Bucs offense was, I legitimately think this was one of the worst playoff offenses ever. This team was quarterbacked by Sean King, who was the first rookie quarterback to start in the conference championship game since the bloody merger. He sucked, is what I'm trying to say, okay? He threw 2 picks and no touchdowns, so damn, okay, well, eventually, after a hot minute, the Rams got the ball in the end zone on a dime from Warner, and the Rams defense now needed to come up huge and stop Sean King from going the length of the field and scoring. But honestly, the Rams should have lost this game. In a massive, controversial call, King found Burt Emanuel on a pass over the middle, but it was ruled incomplete. And, it was the correct call on paper, as at the time, if the ball hit the ground ever, it was ruled an incomplete pass. Terrible rule. So the play was ruled a drop. And literally right after the season, the NFL did what they could to never let this happen again, and made up a whole new rule afterwards to diffuse the controversy. Absurd. I mean, can you imagine if something like that ever happened and benefited the Rams again in the conference championship and decided the Super Bowl? Well, that was not convincing whatsoever, but, they were in the Super Bowl now. 11 points is pretty rough for a team that won their games by an average of 23 points, but the Super Bowl was here. Rams versus Titans. The rematch had come. The Titans, like I said earlier, did beat the Rams, so this game was still expected to be close, with the Rams still projected to be coming out on top, because this Titans team was just weird. They had the Music City Miracle earlier to even get out of the wild card, and Super Bowls between teams with 0 Super Bowl experience each are just, they have something intangible about them that always makes the game start out slow, and this was one of the slowest Super Bowls that ever will be played. The Rams were just getting clamped again on offense. They just couldn't get in the end zone. They were moving the ball okay at times, but it took them until the third quarter before Warner finally found Torrey Holt for a touchdown, because in the meantime, the Rams defense was doing all of the heavy lifting. But once the Rams woke up, so did Tennessee, but it was looking like it was just too late. There wasn't enough time left, and especially with a team like the Titans, who were playing such tight coverage with little safety help over the top, eventually something was going to break free, and then it did. With 14 minutes and 53 seconds left, Kurt Warner had a chance to ice the game on admittedly a tough throw, but he just missed Torrey Holt, and the game would go on. But the Titans just kept attacking the Rams' throats, and hard-nosed football got them another score, and after a field goal, it was tied. 16 all. And the movie script was literally perfect. Here came Kurt Warner, the grocery store bagger, the Arena Football League player, the outcast, jogging onto the field with a chance to go down the field and win the Super Bowl. But the football gods realized how corny that storyline was and made it easy. Warner on the first play hits Isaac Bruce and the Rams scored. Wow. One-on-one coverage? Are you shitting me? Isaac Bruce torched his man and the Rams had the lead in the Super Bowl with under 2 minutes left. Just make one more stop. One stop and the game ends. But Steve McNair just quietly had one of the most incredible drives in NFL history. The Rams couldn't contain his scrambling, and after his 3rd and 5 Lamar Jackson-esque sequence here, we found ourselves at this moment. One of the most iconic plays in NFL history. The Titans, who've had a season that no NFL team can and never will replicate again, versus the most prolific offense in NFL history to this point.
Welcome to a moment in history.
Probably the final play of the game in regulation. It is caught by Dyson. Can he get in? No, he cannot.
The Rams did it. Dick Vermeil did it. Kurt Warner did it. The St. Louis Rams were Super Bowl champions 1 year removed from winning just 4 games. Kurt Warner was the Super Bowl MVP, and both Vermeil and Warner iconically were just crying in each other's arms, and the St. Louis Rams looked like they were just starting to heat up. The only issue was, well, Dick wasn't going to be there anymore. After the win, Vermeil retired, feeling satisfied with where he was in life, but this decision really set the Rams back, not only in the coaching department, but his ability to draft excellent players was a loss felt greatly by the Rams. And still to this day, Vermeil cites this decision to retire from the Rams as the worst decision he ever made. But the bridge was already burned, and Mike Martz, the offensive coordinator, stepped into the head coaching position and was ready to take the Rams offense that already attempted more passes over the expected amount more than any Super Bowl winner ever in 1999 and wanted to do more passing. And somehow, the 2000 Rams offense was even better. Like, so much better too. For the first 6 games, because apparently that was just the magic number for the Rams, they were averaging. You know, actually just guess. I won't even tell you yet. How many points do you think the Rams were averaging in 2000? Maybe you'd guess like 32 or something. That'd be nuts, but you know, not a bad guess. Try 43.6. What in tarnation? Are you yanking my chain? They were damn near dropping 50 a game. 6 touchdowns was pussy shit. If the Rams kept up this pace, obviously, I don't think anyone could, but they easily would have owned every single offensive record to this day. Even the records broken by modern offenses like the 2013 Broncos would be the Rams. However, Bartholomew returned. The Rams were doing well, but now at this point, Trent Green was healthy and was still under contract, but there was nothing he could really do besides sit back and watch Kurt Warner incinerate the rest of the NFL as he, I don't know, kind of found fun new ways to hold his clipboard. So, Bartholomew was getting bored and moved on to possess the body of Kurt Warner, and from here on out, Kurt's career with the Rams would be cursed with injuries, as he broke his hand and missed about a month, and in his absence, Trent Green played pretty well, but eventually, Warner returned, but was never truly 100% healthy. He finished the season, and by year's end, the Rams offense finally got their iconic nickname, though, that everyone's heard a million times. The Warner Brothers. Now, that's... what the fuck, man? That doesn't even stick a little bit. And then we got, voila, the greatest show on turf. And after beating the Saints in the final game of the season off of a 260-yard performance from Marshall Faulk, who, you know, won the MVP, casually, as you do, they would face the Saints again in the wild card. But it just wasn't meant to be, I guess? I don't know. It did not go well. The Rams were just not healthy, and Kurt Warner, who should absolutely have not been playing in this game because he suffered a pretty bad concussion just a few days before this playoff game, also had the hand injury that never really healed, and that's how you get Warner throwing 3 picks and losing a fumble, with 3 of those turnovers leading to 17 total Saints points. But despite being down 31-7, in the fourth quarter, the Rams actually made it close and barely lost by a field goal, but they still should have won. The Rams had a ton of momentum, just got a stop, but then they fumbled the kick with a chance to force overtime, and the offense never got a chance to do anything else. Anyways, yes, the Rams were hurt, but this loss was still inexcusable. The Saints didn't have their starting quarterback, running back, or wide receiver 1, and the Rams still lost, so things were looking like they were falling apart for the Rams. Who knows how long Kurt Warner's body could keep, moving at the NFL level, but despite all of these red flags, the Rams ignored everything and just went out there and did the same old thing in 2001. At this point, I'm assuming you're catching my drift. The Rams were stupid good. Again, another year, another record-breaking offense. The defense was pretty solid again, and Kurt Warner won the MVP, but I'm gonna be honest, this is one of the weaker MVPs in the entirety of NFL history. Marshall Faulk, if anyone in this team, deserved it more than Warner, because although Kurt Warner did have a good year, he had 22 interceptions, which was once again a product of the system he played in, but come on, that was third most in the league, and that shouldn't be rewarded with an MVP, but the voters kind of just went quarterback on the best team, and the Rams surely were the best team, as they won 14 games and were still a buzzsaw. The Rams offense, also, for this 3-year period, from 99 to 2001, was so rare it's not even measurable. They had the best offense in football unquestionably for 3 straight seasons. For 3 years in a row, they averaged 32.7 points per game, and this was in the 2000s, one of the lowest scoring seasons over the past 30 years. So Warner and Mike Martz together orchestrated an offense that had the most touchdowns out of any time in this period too. The defense was solid, and even if we just straight up ignore Marshall Faulk, a Hall of Fame and MVP running back, the Rams still maybe had the most talented offense ever. I'm still team 2013 Broncos, but looking at the wide receiver room alone, they had Isaac Bruce, Hall of Famer, Torrey Holt, the best player not in the Hall of Fame, Ricky Proehl, a solid wide receiver, and Oz-Zahir Hakeem, another good wide receiver. And luckily, they were actually getting the media attention they deserved for this absolutely ridiculous group they had assembled.
But this may be the best group of receivers ever assembled in the NFL.
In all of my life, I've never seen a more horrid abomination than what we're looking at right now. Who made this? So, okay, the greatest show on turf was clicking again, and they were healthy and ready to make it back to the Super Bowl. But Bartholomew lurked, and he was thirsty for blood. And he got just that. He attacked Kurt Warner again, but Warner is just such a stud. He was playing through an injured hand again all year, even with the Rams medical staff, who, by the way, last year said his concussion was fine in the playoffs, said his hand injury was fine and put their AirPods back in. And then he got hurt again in the last regular season game of the year. It was a pointless game, and now he was forced to wear a modified special throat protector for the rest of the season. So the dude was not healthy at all again. I can't do this anymore, man. I gotta talk about that more. Their already injured quarterback was not only playing in a meaningless game, but he was throwing a block on a run play at the end of the game, and because of this injury, they told him not to talk for a week. He couldn't even speak. Okay, my head hurts, but it's playoff time, and Kurt Warner was probably at like 50% strength at best, but it didn't matter. The Rams were just that good. They mollywopped the Packers as Brett Favre threw 6 picks. Yep, 6. And in the NFC Championship game, the home field advantage versus Philly was enough to take them out on a pick as well, and the Rams were going back to the Super Bowl for the first time in this era without Dick Vermeil, and man, am I ever going to be able to make a video without this man being in there? Is that even possible at this point? Super Bowl 36. Patriots versus Rams. This was it. I think this is one of the most important games in NFL history, honestly. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick versus Kurt Warner and the greatest show on turf. And all of the signs early were pointing to a potential upset. The Rams were confident. Too confident. They went out there and relished in the moment, and famously Ricky Proehl boasted of a new dynasty being born tonight, and Mike Martz was also confident as hell, while the Patriots were, well, the Patriots. Bill Belichick was, I guess, confident in his own plan to stop the Rams offense, but he also refused to have the Patriots formally introduced before the game too, to focus on the team rather than the individual. Yep, that sounds like good old Bill to me at his finest. And so, the game began. The Rams were banged up, but they did want this game badly. It's just a shame that the same offense that got them to such high highs turned out to be the very thing that they died by. It's the turnovers, man. It's just so hard to win football games in the playoffs while losing the turnover battle. And this game started off exactly how the Patriots wanted. Basically, this game was supposed to be a boring UFC fight, where one guy was just kind of walking around the ring, waiting for his chance to strike. And after drilling Falk, Holt, and Bruce on damn near every play, eventually the Patriots got their chance and took it. When with 9 minutes left in the second quarter, they sent an all-out blitz for the first time in the entire first half, and it worked. Ty Law got a pick and ran it back 50 yards for the score, and from there the Patriots jumped out to a seemingly insurmountable 17-3 lead. Kurt Warner looked cooked. He was so visibly injured just by looking at the highlights again, it's damn near depressing. It was reported that before the game, Kurt Warner's hand was so fucked, he couldn't even shake John Madden's hand. I couldn't find a source for that, so take it with a grain of salt, but still, regardless, the Rams battled. This team's talent just couldn't be contained, and despite the Patriots, like I said, actually having a good defensive game plan, the Rams were still moving the ball pretty damn well. They had doubled the Patriots' total yards on offense, almost, having 427 on the day. They just couldn't stop turning the ball over. So although they battled back, as you know, it wasn't enough. The Patriots kicked a game-winning field goal, New England became a dynasty, and the greatest show on turf had just put on its last performance. This game was just so winnable too. That's why it hurts. It was one of those games where it was clear that the Rams were the better team. They just didn't win the game, and Mike Martz inexplicably fell victim to good old Shanahan-itis. Literally last game versus the Eagles, in the NFC Championship game, Marshall Faulk had a season-high 31 carries, but in the Super Bowl with an injured Kurt Warner, he only had 17. So, alright, look, on paper, this situation in St. Louis still looked great though. Kurt Warner was still the future of the Rams. They traded Trent Green away to the Chiefs to the one and only Dick Vermeil before 2001, and Warner wasn't even old. He was 28, but he was the oldest guy on the offense basically. Orlando Pace was 26, Torrey Holt was still young, Bruce and Falk were in their late 20s, so all these guys were in their prime still. But what if I told you that not only was this era already over, but Kurt Warner, the reigning MVP of the National Football League, would never win another start as the quarterback of the Rams again. But behind the scenes of this circus act that was captivating the world, the lack of Dick in the front office was starting to take its toll. The draftees for St. Louis were stinky. In 2000, they drafted running back Trung Candidate, who, yeah. And then in 2001, or before the 2001 season, I don't know how this isn't even talked about more, but they had a chance to become a dynasty. Let me ask you this first. How have teams like the 49ers and Chiefs continually kept stacked rosters going year after year? Well, it's good drafting. Like having guys like Karlaftis, Lenore, McDuffie, Greenlaw, late round gems constantly producing is the key to sustained dominance. But the Rams didn't even come within a solar system of that when Mike Martz, who just, look, Mike could call a football game, okay? But God forbid you ask him to draft some talent and his ass was right out the door just hearing the word draft. He didn't want anything to do with it. I just can't believe it still. In the midst of their Super Bowl run, in the 2001 NFL Draft, the Rams had 3 first-round picks. Teams full-on rebuild just to have this opportunity. And with this generational chance, they puked it out, pissed on it, and beat it to death with a metal shovel as they drafted Damian Lewis, Adam Archuleta, and Ryan Pickett. 3 rotational pieces at best. Fabulous. Just fabulous. So now, ahead of 2002, not only were they running out of fuel, but remember the NFL is a copycat league. So while teams geared to adjust their defenses to stopping the Rams' offense, they also took some elements of their offense for their own teams, and look, I got data on that too. This graph pretty much shows that since the takeoff of the greatest show on turf, teams began to start looking for deeper passes more than ever before, and that trend just kept going. 2002 was the beginning of the end, especially for Kurt Warner, like I already told you. His 2002 season was a disaster. There's no other way to put it. He only played in 4 games and he looked terrible. He threw 1 touchdown to 8 interceptions. And it still didn't look healthy, too. Breaking another finger in the same hand. It just, I don't understand, dude. Bartholomew was not around. He wanted the man to rest, which allowed a little-known quarterback by the name of Mark Bulger to come in and take his place. And he played well. He became the fastest quarterback of the time to get to 1,000 completions and went 6-1 as a starter. But Martz decided to stick with Kurt Warner when he was deemed good to go by the doctors they have, and he came back, started 2 games, lost both, and then went back to the bench on IR. And all of this, along with a defense that regressed heavily, headlined by the loss of linebacker London Fletcher, was enough for the Rams to miss the playoffs for the first time in the greatest show on turf era, and moving forward towards an uncertain future. But Mike Martz just wouldn't change his scheme. He just wouldn't. The Rams' offensive line had begun to decline, and both Bulger and Warner suffered injuries due to an excess amount of hits because of these long-ass passing plays. But this lack of change just kept going and eventually led to the end of Kurt Warner's career in St. Louis in just the first game of the 2003 season, when Kurt Warner, in Week 1, had 6 fumbles. That's tied for an NFL record, and that's it. He was officially benched for Mark Bulger, and I think this was really it. Although Falk, Bruce, and Holt were still there, with Kurt Warner being cut the following season, this was the end of the greatest show on turf. But they did have a few more cool moments. In 2003, without Kurt Warner, the Rams still had a pretty good year. They went 12-4, and Mark Bulger had people thinking he was the future and would easily be able to take the suit and tie from Kurt Warner, and he was doing a hell of a job too. He even made the Pro Bowl. Once again, the Rams still had the best home field advantage in the entire league too. They were 8-0 in the Dome again, and going into the wild card, they had won 14 straight games at home. This team had amazing fans, man. They really did. Opposing players also said it was the loudest stadium in sports, and in 2003, even without Kurt Warner, the Rams played in one of the best playoff games ever. They did lose, though, but it was still cool. And this was really their last rodeo, but they went out with a fucking Mike Breen-level bang. Versus the eventual Super Bowl attendee Panthers and former wide receiver Ricky Proehl, whose sole purpose in NFL lore was to get pegged by Tom Brady, there was fireworks. And in this game, the Rams managed to get an onside kick with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter to force overtime. And overtime was just kind of an incompetence battle. Overtime rules also sucked back then, but so did kickers, which led to the rare second overtime, where Steve Smith would call game on 3rd and 14, concluding an absolute thriller, and the Rams lay in ruin. So the Rams actually did manage to make the playoffs in 2004, but it was off of an 8-8 record, and they were pretty much hard carried by Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, because Marshall Faulk had one foot in the coffin, and the defense was nearing Raiders levels of bad. But somehow, they managed to actually win a playoff game. However, nothing came of that, as they would get dogged by the Atlanta Falcons, as Michael Vick killed them with near 50 points. So, now what? Let's first take a step back and look at the state of the Rams. This was a team that just couldn't contend anymore. That was clear to anyone, but god damn it, man, it's just so frustrating. I don't know how Rams fans did it. How could you just sit back and watch as the management that came in after Vermeil did absolutely nothing with 6 straight draft classes, as at this point before the 2005 season, for 6 years, the only really impactful player they drafted was in 2004 when they grabbed running back Steven Jackson. That's it. They drafted like one good player, and even in that same 04 draft class with Steven Jackson, there was not even one other guy worth clicking on. Steven Jackson was the only consistent starter for the Rams from this class. I mean, look, in the 6th round, they took Jeff Smoker. Who the f*** is Jeff Smoker? Well, Wikipedia never even heard of this guy before, but I guess the Rams clearly saw something in the guy. I don't know, bro. So now we get into the weirdness of the 2005 Rams. So Mike Martz ended up having a medical leave in the middle of the season because of an infection, but he already had been beefing with the Rams ownership before this even happened. It's just the heat got turned up when, watching the game from his house, team president John Shaw refused to let Mike Martz call in a play on the phone. So this led to, guess what? Dysfunction. Crazy how that works, right? It was clear to everyone that although Mike Martz wanted to come back, this was it for him. The team not only didn't let him even get close to the facility if they could help it, and also didn't let him coach any more games, even though he was medically cleared by the end of the season. So after the 05 year, the sky was really falling. Mike Martz officially retired, Marshall Faulk retired, and everything was cloudy. One more thing from this 2005 season, though. Don't forget, our boy Bartholomew was still chilling and vibing with Kurt Warner, who was in Arizona now. But the transfer back to the Rams happened in a late season game versus the Cardinals, when Mark Bulger wanted to get his revenge. And he played well, but Kurt Warner played better. He's the better player, too, and the Cardinals won the game. While at the same time, Bartholomew transferred his life essence from Warner into the spirit of Mark Bulger, as he suffered a season-ending shoulder injury in the same game, and more would come in due time. We're not quite in the pit of stink just yet. Almost there, though, don't worry. But this was just a weird time for the Rams. I mean, look at this clip, dude. This is Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing a touchdown to Torrey Holt. That hurts my football brain. It just does. But to start out 2006, the Rams were projected to be one of the worst teams in football. They did start out 4-1 and were on top of the NFC West, but they were just getting lucky. Like, so lucky. And eventually that luck ran out, and the Rams would miss the playoffs. But at the age of just 29, Mark Bulger had arguably the best season of his career, basically having the lowest interception percentage in the NFL at just 1.4, which is really impressive. And Steven Jackson also continued being a beast, running for 1,500 yards. So there was reasons to be mildly optimistic, but this is honestly why I even made this video. This is why I believe this story is worth being told. From 2007 to 2009, pound for pound, the Rams became arguably the worst franchise in sports history. I don't think any team had a worse 3-year stretch than what I'm about to tell you for the next few years of the Rams. 2007, a glorious year to be alive, and unlike me, a lot of people out there had the ability to perceive reality at the time, and if anyone followed the St. Louis Rams this year, They were in for a treat because, man, this team was something else, and 2007 was just the beginning. Under new head coach Scott Linehan, they miraculously lost their first 8 games of the season and finished the year 3-13, and everyone just said how nightmarish of a season it was all year long. Somehow this team was expected to be mildly okay, but no. And instead, they scored a grand total of 263 points. The least amount of points they've scored since they moved to St. Louis. But what if I told you this would be the most points they would score in a season for a fat minute? And this season was being called the apocalypse, but little did they know the darkness was only beginning to come. Before the 2008 season, Rams owner Georgia Frontier passed away, which led to a pretty complicated thing as to where the team would go in the future. Once again, something, blah, 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 inheritance tax, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, this led to Stan Kroenke becoming the owner of the Rams, which changed everything for the team and for the city of St. Louis. But they couldn't worry about that yet. They had football to look forward to, and somehow 2008 was even worse than 07. They brought Trent Green back for nostalgia, or something. Maybe, I don't know. I was baffled to see his name on the roster, but there he is. And the Rams started out the season hot. I don't think you can have a defense worse than this. Through 4 games, the Rams allowed 36.75 points per game to opponents. How do you even accidentally stumble into such an incompetent game plan every week? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. All right. Let's take a step back and look at this roster. By now, everything was gone. Pace, Bruce, Falk, all gone. It was just Steven Jackson on offense with Torrey Holt's corpse, and the defense had the second overall pick in Chris Long, whose career was underwhelming at best, but he wasn't bad, and that's how the Rams finished the season with the second worst defense in football, just barely being edged out by the 0-16 Lions. But don't worry, we'll talk about them in a minute, but the Rams managed to turn everything around. After that 4-game stretch, they fired Scott Linehan and moved on to win 2 games in a row, and from there, the Rams would just keep on making history. There we go, boys. 10 in a row. That's how you tank right there. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of the worst stretch of football this game has ever seen. This team had actually 0 talent outside of Steven Jackson. They were getting pummeled into the soil by bad teams too. The Jets didn't even make the playoffs in 2008, and they hung a 44-point win on them. But now we've gotten there. Before the next season, the Rams hired Steve Spagnuolo to be the head coach. So if you're dozing off right now, that's fine, I hope you sleep well tonight or whatever, but may I recommend locking in for a second, because the 2009 Rams are probably my favorite team ever, so let me tell you how one singular franchise for a season can be this bad, and let's just have some fun. Trust me, it'll be a good time. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest show on turf had returned. The only difference was that all that fun offensive stuff was replaced by the most incurable visual representation of chronic depression I've ever seen. I shit you not. In the next 8 or so minutes, I think I might be able to convince you the 2009 Rams are the worst football team ever. Pound for pound, relative to their era, there is no worse team than the 09 Rams. And we'll start all the way back in week 1. When they started the year off on a beautiful note, they destroyed the Seahawks in the turnover battle, forcing 3 turnovers, possessed the ball for a pretty solid 27 minutes, and lost the game 28-0. Not an easy task whatsoever. However, although there wasn't hope at all, like none, the hope, honestly, even in just week 2, was that luckily, because they had one of the easiest schedules in the league, maybe they could avoid the same fate as the Lions 1 year prior when they went 0-16, but it was going to be an uphill battle to win just a singular game for sure. Let's flash forward to week 6, where the Rams were 0-5 and somehow almost managed to beat the eventual 4-12 Skins, but the late game heroics of Mark Bulger came in clutch to go 4-out on the game's last drive to end it. Whew, that was close. Let's not do that again. But then the Rams traveled to, Jacksonville. No, they're gonna do it, aren't they? In what was supposedly marketed as a revenge game, because Torrey Holt was a Jaguar now, it kind of lived up to the hype, actually. Torrey Holt had a relatively big game, but damn it, man. David Garrard threw a thick 6, and if the Rams were going to lose this game, with a few minutes left, it would take a hell of an effort. But they got it done. They saw the vision, and thank almighty Tom above that overtime rules were just back then, and the Jags pulled off the tank bull of the century, 23-20, and the 0-16 dream was still alive, but sadly not for long. After that narrow victory, there was only one team, one organization that could get in the way of the Rams in the perfect season, and that was, of course, the gatekeepers of greatness themselves, the Detroit Lions. 1 week after a close loss to the Colts, the game of the year happened between the Rams and the Lions, two of the worst teams in football history, and the Lions, with the worst offense in the league, led by offensive coordinator and Rams legend Scott Linehan, brought the heat on Sunday. I had to step out of the room while watching the highlights for this game. I feel like Tom himself felt the disturbance while this was going on, just knowing that football can be played at such a low level while also being titled as professional. This game was awful. It was rancid. It was art. Peak. The Rams came into this game having lost 17 in a row, but it just wasn't fair. Calvin Johnson wasn't playing in this game, which meant that Steven Jackson had more talent in one testicle than the entire Lions team, and despite one of the goofiest plays ever, with the Rams getting a pick and then going back in for a safety, St. Louis pulled it off. They won the game 17-10. They had a fake field goal, too, for a touchdown, which was a 36-yard touchdown pass, which also turned out to be their longest touchdown of the year. I damn near just think that they pressed the wrong button on Madden, but I don't know. Regardless, the Rams won the game. They weren't going to go 0-16. Fuck you, Steven Jackson. You robbed us of history. But don't worry, I assure you the Rams' worst football was yet to come. In another weird turn of fate, once again against the Arizona Cardinals on damn near the same day as Mark Bulger's last injury versus Arizona, again, versus Kurt Warner, Bartholomew emerged, and Mark Bulger got injured again versus Old Master, and this would basically end the career of one of the most underwhelming multiple-time Pro Bowl quarterbacks ever. So, who was the next guy up? Well, his name was Keith Noll, and he might be the most fascinating player ever. He was a player that was so similar to Kurt Warner in many ways. In fact, he even grew up idolizing Warner. He wanted to be Kurt Warner, and he was set to make his first ever NFL start versus the Tennessee Titans, and his dream was about to come true. It was the definition of a feel-good moment, a premier beginning to an emotional roller coaster of a career that will soon blossom in St. Louis, and Keith Noll had maybe to this moment the single worst f***ing debut ever. This trog threw 44 passes, and only had 165 yards and 5 picks. Genuinely, throw me out there, okay? Put me in, coach. I might not be able to see over the O-line, but my fat ass could probably hold on to the ball better than our pal Keith here. Holy smokes. Good gravy. How are you that bad? But, I mean, I hope you're starting to see why I love this team, man. And it just keeps getting better. A few days later, Keith, who was pretty much the starter for the rest of the year, was set to play against Kurt Warner, and he told the press how much this moment meant to him and how excited he was to meet and play against his hero. Well, Kurt Warner responded by saying, I'm sorry, I've literally never heard of that man in my life. Oh my god, that's ruthless, dude. Absolutely ruthless. But honestly, I think Kurt Warner was telling the truth. It's sad. Poor Keith, man. Poor Keith. After getting his little heart ripped out, he threw 3 picks and Kurt Warner obliterated the Rams again, as Kurt picked up his 6th straight win versus the Rams as well. So, now, let me just throw one more thing in here, okay? The Rams finished the season 1-15, but the best joke they made all year was they came a few seconds away from beating the Super Bowl champion Saints. I got nothing. I can't even begin to wrap my monkey brain around how they did that, but they just fell short of glory. And now let me roll this cake that is the 2009 Rams in some frosting for your ass, because I got a little bit more things to say. So, who here remembers when way back in the day, I used a little thing called the SRS score to find out who had the hardest road to a Super Bowl way back in the day? Well, it's coming back. And if you don't remember what an SRS score is, or if you didn't watch that video, that's fine. It's basically a way of combining point differential and strength of schedule into one stat to try to determine how good or bad a team is. And for my money, I'm sorry, I didn't want to find every single team's SRS score in the history of the game, but since the turn of the millennium, I don't think there is a team with a lower SRS score than the 2009 Rams with a redonkulous score of negative 17.44. For reference, my brothers and sisters, the 2017 Browns and 2008 Lions, both winless teams, both have the Rams beat kind of comfortably in the SRS score department, and especially the 2017 Browns are significantly better than the 09 Rams, but I'm not done beating the shit out of this pinata yet, okay? Don't worry, there's still more. It just keeps getting better. This team managed to lose their games by an average of 16.3 points per game, meaning if they lost a game by less than 2 whole touchdowns, that was something serious to celebrate. And I didn't even mention who they took second overall in 2009. Some guy named Jason Smith, who for mental health reasons of any Rams fan living in the St. Louis area, I will refuse to comment on further. Then, 2010 came along, where they drafted the man who was supposed to save their franchise in Sam Bradford. But the Rams made one fatal mistake. Just before they parted ways with Mark Bulger, whose career was about to end, he managed to pass off the curse to Sam Bradford. And just like that, Bartholomew had a new target. And like Warner and Bulger before him, Sam wouldn't be able to escape his cold grip of death as he became the last victim of this warlock in St. Louis. So alright, that's what I got in the 09 Rams. Truly, one of the greatest single-season organizational teams ever put together. Mesmerizing. And 2010 was actually a step in the right direction, only for them to be set right back in 2011 when Sam Bradford, who showed a ton of flashes, just couldn't shake our boy. The injuries kept piling up, and after taking home the Offensive Rookie of the Year award in 2010, in 2011 he was battling a sprained ankle for most of the season and was still one of the healthier players on the roster. They had an ungodly amount of injuries. Like, they made the 2024 Lions look healthy. Wide receiver Danny Amendola and Steven Jackson, who would leave after 2012, were out for a while. A lot of the O-line went down, and they never stood a chance. So that's why they went 2-14. But, you know, I can't really pick on them that much because injuries, and they weren't 09 bad. So now, although they did fire Spagnuolo, it wasn't super fair, but they had an opportunity to get out of the abyss. All they needed was a young, brilliant, offensive mind. So they hired Jeff Fisher. Why? Cool mustache? I don't know, dog. I got nothing. But Jeff Fisher, the king of the 7-win mark, was here. Testosterone dripping from his hamster glued to his philtrum and all. But above all, the Rams made the best hire they've ever made since they brought in Dick Vermeil and subsequently Mike Martz back in the day, with the hiring of general manager Les Snead, who is still with the team to this very day, which means something. And in his first season on the job, he made a trade that took some big-ass balls. Before the 2012 NFL Draft, the Rams decided to stick with Sam Bradford instead of selecting Baylor's Robert Griffin III. Now, if they could get Andrew Luck, I'm sure they would have pulled the trigger in a second, but they decided to trade with the Skins, and in return got this chungus of a haul back. And now all that was left to do was for Jeff Fisher to come in and turn this team around. But hey, I know that sounded negative, but this video is not going to be Jeff Fisher slander, okay? Because although, to be fair, I don't think he could have made the Rams a worse organization if he tried, once again, I firmly believe from 2007 to 2009, in particular, that is just an impossibly low bar to be able to clear. So Jeff Fisher, the king of the 7 and 9, actually brought some stability to this team. In just year number 1 with Jeff Fisher, the Rams defense that for years was in the 26 to 32 range was instantly brought into the 20 to 15 range. Not great, but given the talent, this was somewhat commendable. It's just this Rams era wasn't the same. They were bad, but they weren't funny bad. Like, you know, there's bad movies and then there's funny bad movies. Well, the Rams in the Jeff Fisher era weren't funny bad. They were just boring bad. They tried to be exciting, though, I think. In 2013, they drafted Tavon Austin, which, you know, was one of the most explosive college players of all time, but holy hell did he not even translate to the NFL whatsoever. And also, a lot of the gloom surrounding this organization was happening behind the scenes too, because meanwhile the Rams were setting up to leave St. Louis. It wasn't 100% official at the time, but as you know, they're kinda in Los Angeles now, so yeah. But let's talk more about Sam Bradford, all right? I can't lie. The man wasn't amazing, but to some extent, I think people were underwhelmed by what he showed in the field, even factoring in how little talent was on the Rams roster while he was there. But also, to his credit, Bradford balled out sometimes, and 2013 was his best season. And as the year settled in, Bradford was starting to play some decent to good football. He wasn't a max statted out gunslinger, but he had a 2-game stretch where he averaged 3 touchdowns a game, no picks, and had a passer rating of 121.6. You know, pretty good football, which meant going into a Week 7 game versus the Panthers, all eyes were going to be on the QB matchup between Newton and Bradford. 2 number 1 picks, kinda not playing amazing at the time, but they still had a lot of talent and could turn things around. But there was one major difference between both of these number 1 picks that nobody knew at the time. How could they know? He lurks in the shadows. He hides under your bed. He knows your darkest of secrets. And what do you know? Bartholomew returned.
Chased out by Mike Mitchell at the sideline, and a bad knee injury for Sam Bradford.
The steward of death instructed one of the dirtiest players in recent NFL history, Mike Mitchell, to kill Bradford, which resulted in Sam Bradford tearing his ACL, and this ended his career. Because without Bradford, the rest of the Rams season was a wash, as Rams hero Kellen Clemens would start for a majority of the season. And the offense went right back to being the worst in football. But at least they had a young running back in Zach Stacy, who came a few yards short of a Now, okay, let me ask you this. With all the miserable teams we've gone over, it's clear that there is only one way to truly get out of this cycle of garbage the Rams found themselves in, and that is to draft a generational player. You just have to. The Bengals did it with Munoz. The Browns did it with Joe Thomas. They didn't really work, but Les Snead ended up following that formula to a T. The Rams used the 2nd overall pick in the draft from the RG3 trade to select Greg Robinson, who sucked, but with the pick they had at 13, they selected defensive tackle Aaron Donald. And yeah, we are out of the dark ages now. Or at least we're getting there, because Jeff Fisher was still calling the shots, and in 2014, the Rams were mid to bad again. Obviously, the defense was getting better. Aaron Donald already had become the best defensive tackle in football as a rookie, and the Rams went 6-10, not 7-9, so Jeff Fisher wasn't satisfied. But the Rams had some cool moments this year. They had a 2-week span where they were literally the best team in football, somehow outscoring opponents 76-0. No, I won't elaborate on that further. And they also sent out all the players from the RG3 trade against Washington, because Jeff Fisher's a man of the people. But by far, the biggest issue with the Rams was still the quarterback, because they didn't have one. Austin Davis wasn't getting the job done, and in 2015, they tried their hand at the eventual NFC Championship preview in 2017 when they had a QB room of Nick Foles and Case Keenum. I don't know either, dude. But now, after 2015, when, yes, 7 wins, they got 7 wins again, let's go, they finally realized that they needed a real quarterback and were willing to go all out in the 2016 draft. The Rams wanted that number 1 pick. They felt as if they were an elite quarterback away from competing. They had Aaron Donald, they had other solid pieces, and traded away 2 future first-round picks to the Tennessee Titans. And now, the Rams had to decide whether they wanted Carson Wentz or Jared Goff. There was a legitimate debate for both sides, but one thing was for certain. Both of these guys were project quarterbacks. So when the Rams drafted Jared Goff, they gave him some time to chill on the bench and figure out the NFL. In 2016, Jared Goff had one of the worst rookie seasons ever. But first, it happened. Prior to the 2016 season, the last piece of the greatest show on turf was taken away from the Rams, and that was the city of St. Louis itself. Prior to 2016, the dome the Rams played in that made them famous so many years ago would no longer have an NFL team playing in it, and the St. Louis Rams were no more. And thus, the Los Angeles Rams were born, and sadly, I think they left Bartholomew back in St. Louis, because ever since they moved, even though later they would acquire one of the most injury-prone quarterbacks ever, they've been very fortunate with injuries. So I guess this is goodbye, old friend. And for the Rams, this meant the era of misery was over. Anyways, though, with Bartholomew's abandonment, At this point, Jeff Fisher had been tied up and was sitting on the bottom of the ocean gasping for air, but he had a little fight left in him. To start the year out, they actually did okay and sat Jared Goff. They started out 3-1 for the first time since 2006. I repeat, for the first time in a decade, this team was over 500 through week 4. Well, isn't that just swell? So back to Goff. Oh man, turns out Jeff Fisher wasn't the quarterback whisperer that nobody thought he was going to be, and was fired following a decimation to the Falcons, which didn't exactly help Jared Goff's development. He simply had one of the worst rookie seasons a rookie first overall pick has ever had. The Rams were a terrible team, as they led the NFL in drop rate at 7.8, which wasn't helping Goff, but he legitimately played 6.5 bad games out of 7. Not ideal, including a game versus the 49ers, where he threw 24 passes and didn't break 100 passing yards. Todd Gurley, who was also here now, honestly had been disappointing to this point, and the Rams and Les Snead put all their eggs in the same basket they did with Sam Bradford. So now they were forced to bet that Jared Goff had talent, because he showed some flashes, but he really needed to step things up. And just like before, they got themselves some offensive line help too. But instead of Greg Robinson, they signed Andrew Whitworth, who would change everything for Goff. But now, they had a chance to get out of the abyss. They needed a young, brilliant, offensive-minded guy. I wish I could make a joke here, but no. The Rams actually made one of the best coaching hires ever.
Sean McVay is the new head coach of the LA Rams.
This was, and still is, the most impactful head coaching hire by any team since the Chiefs hired Andy Reid. From 2004 to 2016, the Rams had 0 winning seasons and had a peak of misery that was so low that I argued that no NFL team has ever experienced such lows in the modern era. The Jeff Fisher years, as well as just like the Rams' colors in general in St. Louis, were dull and boring to the point where people began to forget the Rams were even an NFL team, let alone that they ever even used to have a high-powered offense, ever. But now, life was injected back into the team. Youth. Because Sean McVay, at the time, the youngest coach in NFL history, came in and he had pieces to work with, man. Goff, Gurley, Donald, the newly drafted Cooper Kupp. This team had a ton of talent, and right away in year number 1, Sean McVay got to work. The Rams, all of a sudden, were a powerhouse in 2017 out of seemingly nowhere. This was the same formula they followed back in 1999, though. A 1-year turnaround and potentially a Super Bowl run. And Sean McVay decided the best way to use Jared Goff was to get the ball out of his hands quickly and spam the hell out of the outside zone. Why? Well, because as a Shanahan disciple, of course that's what he did. But also, the Rams had a Gurley. Todd motherfucking Gurley was a man possessed by the spirit of Marshall Faulk and Jeffrey Dahmer. The guy was always hungry. Todd Gurley finished 2017 with career highs in touchdowns, rushing yards, receiving yards, yards per game. He was just amazing. Everything about this 2017 Gurley year already just gives me nostalgia. Dude was fantastic, and that was enough to take home the Offensive Player of the Year award, and just like that, we're officially back in the greatest show on turf era. It's been reborn again. Now, I'd love to just sit here and geek out about Sean McVay's concepts and zone schemes and all that, but honestly, the biggest thing that he did was just innovate offense as a whole. And what's crazy about McVay is even now, 8 years after he's been hired, he's still one of the most sharp and brilliant innovators in the league today, which is like the opposite of what Jeff Fisher did. But also, Sean McVay just brought a culture to this team. Even watching like locker room videos today, you can tell the players just respect the guy, and that is invaluable. But it also only just kept going from there. 2017 was supposed to be their rebuilding year, like I said, yet they went 11-5 and only lost to the reigning Super Bowl champion Falcons. But the season was great. That feeling of clinching a playoff berth must have felt like getting a taste of water after 3 days stranded in the desert. And also, I should mention, I mean, you're probably already aware, but in 2017, Aaron Donald would start his streak of winning 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in 4 seasons, as he was the best defensive player on the planet by a gargantuan amount. It was Aaron Donald and then everyone else. Still, we might never see another player have the type of impact Aaron Donald had in his prime as a defensive tackle, and he was the best player on the Rams from the day he was drafted to the day he retired. The 2018 Rams were Sean McVay's masterpiece, though. Even with Cooper Kupp done for the year with an ACL, the Rams were shattering records again. This time, though, the Rams leaned even more on the run. They had the 3rd most rushing yards in the league by year's end, and the most in Rams history since 1983. The issue was, well, since the Rams had the greatest show on turf in their history, all those records were kinda set in stone, and meanwhile in the Midwest, the Kansas City Chiefs were stealing all of Sean McVay's thunder. They were getting the headlines as the NFL's next great team with that f***ing frog guy, and the Rams started the year off 8-0, but were still an afterthought before dropping a game to the Saints, who honestly were the better team, but they challenged the Chiefs to a duel. And what ensued, as I'm sure you're aware of, was one of the greatest football games ever played.
On first down, Everett in stride!
I'm so sorry, because Roger hates it when you show more than like 6 seconds of game footage. I can't show the whole game, but I'm really telling you, if you haven't watched this game, at least watch the highlights. This game was absurd. Mahomes and Goff were lighting up everything. Defensive touchdowns were everywhere. Speed, speed, speed. This is what the modern NFL could be. 2 wizards of offense casting spells at each other, and the Rams managed to pull off the game of the year 54-51, and this roster just seemed destined to win the Super Bowl. They also did pretty much everything right from a management position too. They still had Goff on his rookie deal and went all in on this season. The team was loaded with veterans. Brandon Cooks was here, Marcus Peters, and Ndamukong Suh. They traded for Aqib Talib too. They just had dudes who knew how to win. But after the Chiefs game, the Rams kind of slowed down. On primetime football versus the Chicago Bears, another potential contender in the NFC, who would go on to have an extremely successful postseason, Jared Goff was swapped out for a fan in the stands, I think. I don't know. I have no explanation. He went for 180 yards on 44 passes, 0 tutties, 4 picks, and a 19.1 passer rating. And what's remained Goff's weakness still to this day is, well, if you can pressure Goff and make him uncomfortable, he will make mistakes. So although he was and still is a good quarterback, he has severe limitations, and that's what separates a good player from a great one. So although concerns were growing and the popular thing to do was say the Rams would get upset in the playoffs, they already had a bye, and at 13-3 faced off against the Dallas Cowboys in the divisional round. But the team didn't look as explosive still. What could have possibly been the issue? Nobody knew, right? Well, it wasn't a whole scheme thing. The answer is honestly simple. It was Todd Gurley. Turns out, when a running back who once tore his ACL that suffered another significant knee injury on the same knee loses a massive amount of his burst. And that's what sucks about the NFL. When you can't trust your body, you just can't play anymore, especially a running back. And after 2018, Todd Gurley's superstar career was over, as the Rams were forced to rely on old CJ Anderson for the remainder of the playoffs. Regardless, though, the Rams got to the NFC Championship game and faced off against the New Orleans Saints, a team who, like I said, was honestly just better. It felt like this was Drew Brees' time. The Rams were injured, and the Saints were hungry, which led to, predictably, an early big Saints lead that could have been more, but they were going up and down the field with ease on the Rams, up 13-0 in just the first quarter. But the Rams fought. The defense tightened up, Goff matched Brees, and that's all I got. Look, the Saints should have won this game. Yes, the Rams played well for their standards. Yes, the Saints blew chances to win this game, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the Saints did everything they could to get themselves in this position, and still, they had the game taken away from them by the Zebras, with the worst no call in the history of the NFL happening, and for the second time ever, the Rams were on the right side of a ref up so bad they had to make a whole new rule because of how one singular play went down. So, alright, this led to the Super Bowl. The Rams made it back, but this was just not the game. It was terrible. The Saints and Chiefs were honestly both better teams than the Rams and Patriots, but what we got was CJ Anderson versus Sony Michel, and without Todd Gurley at even 15% strength, the Rams offense got absolutely clamped by Belichick and Brady. Again. God damn it, Tom, it's every fucking video. Let teams just have one. Just one. But no. The Patriots' defensive game plan, once again, completely neutered an upstart hotshot Rams offense as the Rams punted on the first 8 straight possessions of the game. And it was a solid ode to the late 2000s and early 2010s Rams. This game was just unwatchable. But in the end, The Patriots made the biggest plays of the game when it mattered. Gronk had a nice catch, Gilmore had a hell of a stop, and the Patriots won the Super Bowl, and the Rams went home depressed. But they had Sean McVay, Aaron Donald, and had just been punched straight in the gut. And although they had stuff to evaluate, they were undoubtedly in one of the best positions in football. It's just nobody could have ever thought of what Les Snead was beginning to cook up. For the next 2 seasons, the Rams continued to be a step behind the rest of the NFC's top contenders in the 49ers and eventually the Buccaneers, while spending more than anyone. After the 2020 season, they had only picked up 1 playoff win, but they had lost literally every first-round pick in the process. They kept trading for veterans. I don't know why. They just couldn't stop doing it. They went out and sent 2 firsts for All-Pro and future Hall of Fame corner Jalen Ramsey, and heading into 2021 at this point, they needed to make a move. Todd Gurley was just a fleeting memory at this point, and the Rams needed to make a final decision on Jared Goff. Yes, they already paid him, but they needed to be 100% certain that he was a quarterback who could bring a Super Bowl to Los Angeles. But after years of watching his career play out, Sean McVay saw another opportunity and took it. As the Rams traded Goff away in what would become one of the most unique trades in NFL history, as the Lions received what will become Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta, 4 very good players, in exchange for the complicated former first overall pick who ruined the Rams' 0-16 campaign back in the day in Matthew Stafford, and a new era was born in LA. So this led to arguably the most fascinating trade ever, like I said. And the question is, was this trade really worth it for the Rams? I mean, come on, Matthew Stafford's good, but how much of an upgrade is he even over Jared Goff? I mean, we're talking like the 14th best QB in the league at the time versus like the 9th at best. But Sean McVay clearly believed in Matthew Stafford. So while the rest of the NFL world speculated and had no idea what to do with the Rams, some people thought they'd be top 5, some thought they'd disappoint, and you can't win in the NFL just grabbing a bunch of big-name guys, right? But right away in week 1, just week 1, the NFL world was introduced to Matthew Stafford on the Los Angeles Rams, and it was clear that Stafford was going to be a Ram for a long, long time.
Rolling left, going for the fake. He's going to air it out. Deep downfield, and he gets up and rumbles to the end zone.
Prime time Sunday night football, first game, first possession, Stafford bombed to Jefferson. And from there, the Rams never looked back. They were simply laying waste to everyone. They dropped 34 on Tom and the Bucs in week 3 and proceeded to win 7 of their first 8 games, which included a game against Jared Goff and the Lions, who were having a Lions season of all time. And for the Rams, their plans just kept working. They weren't a flawless team from top to bottom, but goddamn, their high-end talent was not okay. Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, all in their primes, at their best, were on this team, while Cooper Kupp also emerged and became the best wide receiver in the NFL. By year's end, Cooper Kupp had the best wide receiver season in football history. It's not even particularly debatable. He got the Triple Crown, one of the rarest things an NFL player can get, leading the league in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And I traded him off my fantasy team in week 2, but whatever. That's my thing. And he continued to break records, so go me. But Cooper Kupp was legitimately unstoppable, and Snead just kept pouring in more talent to add to the team, as they traded for Von Miller and signed Odell Beckham Jr. and Eric Weddle's old ass for the playoffs. So they weren't going to have a first-round pick until 2024, and they just kept trading more picks. Now here's the thing. The Rams were 12-4 going into the final week of the season and had a chance to keep the 49ers out of the playoffs, a team that nobody wanted to face, but they lost. And because the NFC was loaded this season, the Rams weren't even close to the number 1 seed and had to play in the wild card against the Arizona Cardinals, who were undefeated for most of the season, but it didn't matter. They squashed Arizona off whatever the hell this was from Kyler, but it was time now for their final test. The Rams cannot win a Super Bowl unless it's through Tom. And in just the divisional round, the Rams were set to play against Thomas and the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And even worse, the Rams had a lead. I know, 27-3 too. How can you even dream about holding on to a lead versus Tom? Cooper Kupp was balling, but the question was, could the Rams just hold on? These were 2 filthy teams, and with the Packers getting bounced in the divisional round, The NFC was wide open, but the Rams led the Bucs back into the game. Nobody was surprised, though. I mean, it is Tom, but after he Tommed everywhere, the surprising thing was how the Rams offense just shut down in the second half. Kupp had a fumble, they had a bad snap after a fumble forced themselves. This game was just nuts. I don't know how else to put it. There was just something in the air. This is what happens when you play Tom Brady. You can't ever take your foot off the gas, and the Rams played too conservative, and Tom made them pay. And after another whoopsie, missing a field goal and fumbling again, the Rams all of a sudden were looking like underdogs. The Bucs tied it up at 27-all, and the fate of the best Rams team since 2001 was in the hands of two guys, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Could their connection that scorched the league all regular season come up big one more time? And what happened next was one of the most iconic plays of the last decade.
Deep downfield! He's got Kupp again!
Stafford to Kupp twice. Rams clock it, and Matt Gay knocks down the kick, and the Rams win it at the buzzer. Cooper Kupp is a grown man. A grown man, I tell ya. Game on the line, and Kupp proved he was the best receiver in football with 183 yards and punched a ticket to the NFC Championship game where the 49ers, the team they allowed in the tournament, were waiting. And from the second this game began, it was clear these teams were at the very least evenly matched. But as the game dragged on, the 49ers began to pull away ever so slightly, taking a 17-7 lead going into the fourth quarter. Okay, Kyle, just close it out. Nice and smooth, right? Should be easy. Well, the 49ers started to make oopsies. Jaquiski Tartt dropped a Stafford arm punt, but the story of the Rams had been the same all year. Rally around their stars, and that's what they did. After George Kittle scored to go up 2 possessions, Aaron Donald gave a speech to the whole Rams defense, and from there, the 49ers never scored again. And meanwhile, Matthew Stafford and Kupp just did what they did all year long. Cooper Kupp and OBJ did stuff time and time again, and the Rams overtook the lead, went up 20-17, and kept the dream alive. Last play of the game. The best player in the game had to make a play, and he did. Nobody in the history of the game was going to stop Aaron Donald on that play. No one. And the Rams forced a pick and made the Super Bowl for the second time ever under Sean McVay. Super Bowl 56. See what I'm talking about? They're back in the Super Bowl. The Rams are just like, it's a roller coaster with them. They started at such a high and then just went right down and then came right back up. So this team isn't that bad. And in Super Bowl 56, they played against the Cincinnati Bengals. And these were two teams that weren't really supposed to be here, but they were. The Bengals and the Rams. Parity was at an all-time high, and we got a battle. The Rams looked like the better team throughout, but of course, it had to come down to the last drive. With Odell hurt and the Rams making some mistakes, once again, it had to come down to their best players. Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, and Cooper Kupp. They had to make plays. And first up was the offense. And right on cue, Stafford and Kupp, they had a huge fourth down conversion. And then Stafford made one of the best plays in Super Bowl history and made a necessary no-look dime to Cooper Kupp. All that offseason work paid off, and after benefiting from a penalty, Sean McVay continued to trust the best player on the field, and a fade to Cooper Kupp meant the Rams had the lead, and now it was Aaron Donald time. 43 seconds left, fourth down. The Super Bowl is on the line, and I actually think that everyone kind of felt what was happening. You knew it. If you were watching the game, I knew it, and even Sean McVay knew that Aaron Donald was going to make a play.
Aaron Donald's going to make a play.
And that's exactly what he did. Aaron Donald, once again, made the play of the game, and the Rams were Super Bowl champions. All those veterans got rings. Aaron Donald had a ring, and for the first time since 1999, the Rams had a Super Bowl. What a team. It's a shame it didn't work out in St. Louis, but in just 5 years, Sean McVay brought the Rams back from the clutches of doom. They escaped Bartholomew, and McVay took them all the way to the promised land. So Rams fans were happy. They were satisfied, but they wanted more. It just didn't come in 2022, because injuries ruined their season completely as Stafford and Kupp missed time, and instead they looked ahead to 2023, but it was more of the same. The Rams started the 2023 season out on a horrible note. They were 3-6, and it looked like the well of talent was running dry, with age catching up to them as well. Because at this point, they still haven't had a first-round pick since Jared Goff in 2016, and the year was 2023. They hadn't had a first since Jeff Fisher. Luckily, though, the Rams were still drafting decently well. Puka Nacua was a 5th-round pick in 2023, and with Cooper Kupp getting up there in age, he held down the fort and formed a connection with Stafford to help the Rams rally to end the season, winning 7 of their last 8, which is really impressive stuff, but they had to go against the Lions in the wild card, and against Matthew Stafford's old team, they were just out-talented, as they fell 23-24 as time was winding out in the Matthew Stafford era. Which brings us to the 2024 Rams, who once again started out slow and ended the year off on a great note, but then again, in the playoffs, although they were able to upset the Vikings because Sam Darnold had some issues, they were just out-talented again by the Eagles. They're good, but they're just not good enough, and all those picks are starting to just wear out. The talent is not able to compete with the NFC's best, so who knows now? With Matthew Stafford's career in limbo, we don't know if he's going to come back or not. The Rams might have to press the rebuild button sooner rather than later, but their defense is looking great, and Sean McVay is still going to be a mastermind for years to come, so the Rams are definitely not in a bad situation. And they also have a generational wide receiver talent in Puka Nacua, so that's it. That's the story of the Los Angeles Rams. From the highs of the greatest show on turf to the lows of lows during the Steven Jackson era, and now the redemption arc of Sean McVay and the new age Los Angeles Rams, they truly are one of the most interesting teams in NFL history and are giving hope to all other teams out there at the lowest points in their franchise right now that all you gotta do is take some risks and anything is possible. And one day, who knows, maybe even your team can hire a brilliant coach and win a Super Bowl. But anyways, if you like this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you did like this video, watch this video I did a few weeks back on Baker Mayfield's career in Tampa Bay. It's pretty good, trust me. And thanks to all my Patrons for pledging $1. Truly does mean a lot. But anyways, until next time.